Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the chat room. The chat room is open. Welcome to Exploring Ancestral Wisdom and Healing. This is Denise King Francisco, and welcome to everybody who's already entered into the chat room. I like that the first person in is Lady Hawk Cheta Weed. That's a perfect segue into our show tonight because we're talking about our ancestral relationship with animals. And I have got an amazing team tonight on the show. First and foremost, we have Nicole Fix. Hey, Nicole.
Hello.
And we have Linda Griezak from Sanibel Island, Florida. Hey, Lindy.
Hello. Good to be here tonight.
It's great to have you. And of course, we have David Cad Sturkin in the house. Hey, Cad.
Howdy, everybody.
It's good to have you wherever you happen to be listening to us around Grandmother Earth tonight or whatever time it is for you. It might be tomorrow where you are listening to us right now. But welcome to the show, and it's always a discussion. So please, in the chat room, feel free to ask questions and be part of our topic for tonight. Ancestral wisdom and healing is a hot topic here in the West, in the United States in particular, and we've been talking about this since November. And last month when we were all together, it ended on the note with, folks in the chat room wanting to talk about our relationship with animals and why it is that some people consider animals to be our relatives and look at them as equals, not something subordinate, not something to be tamed, but they are our equals here on Grandmother Earth. And so let's get into the topic tonight. And I think first and foremost, when we think of our relationship with animals, we can often think of our own pets in our home and perhaps one particular animal that we've loved or an animal that got us through a trauma. And I'd like to begin by asking Nicole Fix, our resident psychotherapist, to talk about, what it is about animals and us humans that creates an energy of healing.
It's a good question. And, I think we as humans are built for relationships, for connection. And sometimes there's a lot of, trauma that can happen in these relationships with humans. And animals can be a very safe way to get connection. And, there's so much unconditional love that comes from animals that can be so calming and comforting. So, just see that, there's actually, when we have like physical touch with, whether it be with a human or with an animal, there's oxytocin that's released, which is the love drug. So, you think of how you feel after you get home from a long day or something stressful in an animal. If you have an animal, they crawl in your lap or you're petting them, it just releases these, these feel-good endorphins that is the oxytocin, the love drug, the, drug we feel as mammals from our mother and from the physical touch. And so just there is a physiological reaction that's going on too.
And kind of I like that you brought up the whole idea of just unconditional love.
Yeah, and that is hard to have in a human relationship, right? So,
yeah.
There's just a whole lot of pain that can happen in human relationships and not as often in those animal relationships. So a lot of healing that comes through that unconditional love. Mm-hmm.
I've noticed in the past few years the number of people that have their companion animals with them on flights and in places of business really has grown.
Yeah, and that's another good point is, there's like these emotional support dogs that are becoming very popular, and making it actually like they're phrased as an emotional support. So, they're doing studies with, those that are experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, social anxiety, agoraphobia, which is the phobia of like going out into social settings, having an emotional support dog can really help them feel more confident, more comfortable in these social interactions, really helping them to feel more comfortable amongst other people. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think a lot of us can relate to the comfort of that our animals bring us and give to us so freely. And I love that now, it's okay to have a companion and no one thinks twice about it. One of my friends here locally works for Paws with a Cause. And I love the fact that now we actually have organizations that help to coach and bring animals up to speed with the needs of humans. And the bond is really quite remarkable. It's quite remarkable, right down to our military personnel who are now coming home from war and finding comfort and healing in companion animals. Cad, recently, not too long ago, actually, you and I were in Ireland, and you and I had a wonderful little jaunt into a place there at Bunratty Castle to look up our clan and family coat of arms. Would you talk about, what you found on your family coat of arms?
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting. Actually, as you start to delve into looking at if your family actually has a coat of arms, and many of the clans most of the clans in Ireland do, that most often there is an animal on the coat of arms, and that animal is often identified by the clan as an animal that they honored or they felt a connection to. Mm-hmm. And mine was, I believe, the lion, if I can remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. The King coat of arms also has the lion. And, it began somewhere. So there's an alliance with a family, the name of the family, and that particular animal. So we find our association with animals in a lot of places. And Tina is in the chat room. She works in a salon. And she's saying we have a lot of pets come to the salon, clients and our own pets. I think of Cynthia Jones when I think of that, bringing little Miss Molly to the school. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is just talking a little bit more about our relationship with animals. One of the things that I think when you talk about having companion animals, actually, they're training animals now to be able to do things, or dogs specifically, to be able to do things like snip out cancer in patients' bodies, or to be able to help someone as they're starting to go into a seizure, so that they realize that that's what's happening. So, the connection between us and the animal companions that we have is more than just, it's a very deep connection, I think, that we have. And we use therapy dogs at the hospital, so I think, we can't discount that connection that we have with the animals that we're around every day.
I agree with that. And I think of Elise when she first had an interest in horses and wanting one. Her requirement before I got her first horse was that she would volunteer at an equine therapy place, to see how she would relate to the animal. And it's amazing how the bond began to form between her and a particular horse straight away. So this idea of being bonded way back in the time of our clans and the naming of families tells us a whole lot, I believe, who we are as people. And it's interesting, Nicole, I had a client today who recently went through a very rough patch, and she said to me, I'm thinking about getting a dog because when I move out again, I'm worried about going into depression. And I feel as though an emotional support dog would help me through depression. How do you, you're a mom. You were saying earlier today that you have a 21-year-old cat. So you have Sophia, you have your cat, and there's this love, there's this bond, and they do help uplift our mood. How does that happen?
Well, yeah, just thinking about back to that, that unconditional love and that the oxytocin, the endorphins being released. And, we, especially someone that's struggling with symptoms of depression, our tendency is to like withdraw and isolate and not want to be around people, which can feed like these symptoms of anxiety and not wanting to be around, it can make like the whole cycle pattern worse. And so I think that just having an animal there is this presence, this kindred spirit soul in an animal that can really alleviate some of that loneliness that comes with isolation. And, we know that, again, that we're hardwired to have these connected interactions and these relationships. And so, having an animal support that can give you that interaction, at home, but then also comfort you as you go out into the world, it's so vital. So, your client that you saw, she's very in tune.
Well, I remember last year, little Miss Sophia wanted a unicorn for Christmas. And I love she did get a unicorn. Thank you, Uncle Todd. And so my thought about all of that is our love, I believe, for animals when we're really little can often even begin with a stuffed animal. Beanie Babies. Look at the Beanie Baby craze.
Yeah. And Sophie, she's got to have, Sparkle goes with her to school every day for a quiet time. And Dad, I think you've gotten her a dragon that travels around the world with her too. So, yeah.
Holly in the chat room is saying, and their love for us, meaning pets, doesn't end when they cross over. It goes on in some amazing ways.
Yeah. Yep.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Linda Griezak down there in Sanibel Island, Florida.
Yes, I'm here.
How long were you a public school teacher and private school teacher?
42 years. 42 years.
Okay, so you're
And
like a living saint.
I'm subbing now.
Wow.
I'm a teacher.
You are a teacher. You are a lifelong teacher. And in that, you teach a whole lot of things. And one of the reasons why I really was hoping you would be able to join us tonight is when we're talking about our relationship to animals going back a long way, whether it's represented on the family crest or coat of arms, or we have a clan that is represented by an animal, the crane clan or the turtle clan. One of the things that you and I, for many years, 15 years now at least, you and I have been traveling back and forth to South Dakota, there to Pine Ridge and Rosebud, and you and I have been in many, many, many ceremonies together. And there is a relationship there with our Lakota relatives, with the animals, both seen and unseen, that is profound. And they often refer to the animals as relatives. Would you talk about that for a moment, that they're actually known or called by the word relative?
Yes, very, very exciting information for me. And I think it was, maybe 2002. When I went into an initiation ceremony, it was my first real initiation into learning about animal relatives, because that was what it was all about. And what I've done for the last 15 years is I have recognized these animal relatives that were introduced to me during these ceremonies. And I've actually incorporated their characteristics and taught, probably for the last 10, 15 years, these animal characteristics to my students, bridging the physical world with the spiritual world, actually using the animals. And to this date, I have students that will see an eagle fly over and say to me, "The speed of eagle, I've got to watch my tongue," or something. And it's just so thrilling. I'm so happy to be on the program and talking about it. The mythology it was so rich. I can't even begin to talk about that. But the spiritual aspect with the physical here on earth is just profound.
It is. Linda, we're getting some reverb, I think, from your phone. Do you have us on speaker?
Yes, I do.
Okay, maybe you can take us off speaker so we can hear you more clearly.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah. Sometimes being on, yeah, that's way better. So you're talking about being in ceremony and animals from spirit coming to you that have impacted your life.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I don't think I can get you maybe on speaker for a moment, please.
Okay.
Hello?
Hey, Linda.
Yeah, for some reason, if I take it off speaker, I don't think you can hear me.
Okay. All right. Well, then we will just continue to go as we are going. There are times in ceremonies that animals come to us in from spirit and in moments of sacred time. Cad, you're a practicing shaman, and sometimes we think that the realm of spirit or mythology is relegated to something that is not tangible and really can have no meaning other than it makes for a great fairy tale. But you and I both know that mythology has a place, and beyond that, those worlds are very much alive, and that the animal spirits or spirits of animals that Holly alluded to, they do become intercessors and they become allies. Would you talk about animals from spirit as allies, whether they're a pet of ours that's crossed over or one brought to us in dream time or ceremony?
Well, let me give you an example of an encounter I had that was unusual. So, from my perspective, one of the things that I as I'm going throughout my daily practice, if I have an encounter with an animal, I believe that they oftentimes are there to teach me, that there's something that they're there to give to me. And so about a year, I think it was a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago in May, I was walking Max early in the morning in downtown Grand Rapids, and we were just a little less than a block from my house, and all of a sudden Max just froze. And I said, "Hey, Max, what's going on?" Because usually he's pretty active and likes his walks. And I looked up, and there's a black bear in downtown Grand Rapids.
Wow!
You know, just looking at us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, over the next several days, I had to ask the bear, and I truly asked the bear, what was it that you were there to teach me? What was it that you, what lesson did you have that I need to learn from today? And so, I view encounters like that as very significant because, for one thing, you don't see the bear in the middle of the city, but oftentimes I think those encounters can go by and we just really don't pay attention to them. We just think, I saw this bird, or I saw, Ted Andrews' book. Ted Andrews' book has a book called Animal Speak.
Mm-hmm.
That is really good. If you want to learn about the various characteristics of an animal and what that animal, because oftentimes the animal has a characteristic that might be a lesson or some teaching that maybe you would need at that time. And Ted Andrews' book is a good book, I think, to start with, because it teaches you about the various characteristics of an animal, but it also, in my experiences, oftentimes I will ask the animal, what is it that you're here to teach me? And when my little guy, my little Sebastian, who was my little Shih Tzu puppy, when I was getting ready to move into my apartment, he told me 2 weeks before we were going to move that he would be moving with me. And I said, well, and it was very clear to me. Yeah, the message was very clear, and I said, "Well, what do you mean you're not going to be moving with me?" And sure enough, 3 days before we were getting ready to move, he died. So I don't think we can ever discount. There's a lot of folks that do animal communication. Our animals do try and communicate with us. It's believed at one point that animals and people spoke the same language. And we talked to each other very readily. And so, and we've kind of lost, I think we've lost that connection as we've seen them as separate from us. Because I think that they always are communicating with us on a regular basis. It's just sometimes we're not listening. So.
That's beautiful. And I agree with that. I think they're always trying to tell us. And I remember a few years back, Amantha Murphy, one of the first times that she was here, I had to leave for some reason. And she said, the last time that you left here, Dana, Gabriel was just in a heap. And he told me that before you go, this is what he would like for you to do for him.
Exactly.
Right. And so exactly what Amantha relayed is something that I do. Yeah. When we think about our connection to animals and the way that they speak to us, I love it, particularly with little kids. When it comes to little kids in spirit anyway, it's magnificent because they haven't lost, for the most part, the idea that the unseen world is real. And they haven't lost the idea that their cats and their dogs understand what they're feeling or what they're saying. Nicole, do you ever find Sophia having conversations with your kitten?
Yes. And it's, I'm just thinking about how every day when we leave, the house, we always say bye to Kit. That's my cat. And Sophie's always like, hold down the fort. And that's what she does during the day. Do you think she's having all kinds of fun in the house? And yeah, just this idea of this whole, persona in life, and that is far beyond our imagination. What could be happening?
Yeah, I love that. Lindy, when we're talking about all of this and our ability to communicate with, animals that are getting ready to cross the veil, those that have already crossed the veil, those that are present, we know that there's an intelligence beyond physicality, and some are more aware of it than others, particularly the young people. But there are those that have such a close connection to animals, particularly with our indigenous medicine people around the world, that there are times they can actually become that animal. Do you believe that to be true, Linda?
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. In fact, I've seen it. I'm not really sure, but when we go to the reservation, as we have many times, the things that we've experienced, beyond what you would think, but yes, I do believe that. I think I have seen that. Also, back at the work today, I saw a shapeshifter person, and I believe I saw him shift into a chair. So, I mean, yes. And I think with animals, it's just magical. We see these animals come through in ceremonies.
Well, and I know that you and I can think of one occasion in particular where you and I watched the transformation, as you're talking about, of a medicine man into an animal. And in this particular case, it was a coyote.
Absolutely.
Remember that? Yeah. So our connection is as cordial or as deep as it can be in this human life. And Lady Hawk asks a great question. They're so good, they, meaning animals, are so good at helping to teach us both from this side and from what we call the other side. Do you feel that there are also opportunities for us to teach them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you were talking about the coyote. And what's interesting is lately, packs of coyotes will gather in my yard on the island. We were kind of overrun by coyotes. But I always think that it's wisdom and folly and balanced work play. So you actually take those, animals you see in ceremony, and you can actually, you see how they manifest themselves in your life, and they teach you something about yourself. Do things that are the best, even if it's difficult. Things like that, which is just powerful.
Yeah,
I do think you teach them, and I do believe that, yes, I am very much involved.
Yeah, I think that we can inform them as well as they inform us. I remember one time down there on Sanibel with you, we were at the beach and there was a German man. I was walking in the water and a German man came flailing his arms at me, lady, lady. And remember, I was walking along and there were 3 sharks. Yeah, there were 3 sharks that were swimming right along with me. He saw them, I didn't. And, when I looked over and there were those 3 sharks, and I thought, well, isn't that something? And, I slowly walked out of the water, but then later you and I talked about what the shark meant and what was the message. And for me, it was about having good boundaries. And, keeping...
And also, don't trust the instincts of others, or trust the instincts of others or something, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
You learn so much on the shore.
Yeah. Yes, Kat.
One thing I'd like to add to Lady Hawk's, in response to Lady Hawk's question. So I do think that we actually can offer things to animals as well. Let me just give you an example. When I adopted my little Sebastian from the animal shelter, he was very withdrawn. I would go, I'd put him up on my lap, and he would jump down and go and sit in the corner. At night, I would put him up on the bed, and he would jump down and go sit in the corner. And it became pretty clear to me that he probably had been with someone that did not treat him very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting because it took over a 6-month period of time that finally he came to trust me. I remember it was actually on a Christmas day that he came and jumped up on the sofa. And I was talking on the phone, and suddenly I realized he was licking my hand. And that was the first time he had any type of interaction, of affection during that time. So, I think, especially with animals that have been treated poorly by other humans,
mm-hmm.
We can teach them to trust. We can teach them that they can be loved. We can teach them security. So, I think that we can offer them gifts as well as the gifts that they offer us.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's back and forth. It's
mm-hmm.
It's a give and take between both of us. Yeah.
I think it's a soul commitment on many levels. Nicole Fix?
Yes.
Do you believe that animals go to heaven?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just reading something about, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like something that was posted on Facebook or something, but someone talking about, I think it was a hospice worker or something, talking about how often people, when they're near death, will see their animals, that have crossed over before them, and how comforting it is to them. And so, just those confirmations of it happening. But yeah, I have to imagine that they absolutely do.
And so in the world of therapy and psychotherapy, for those of you that are wondering, how do you get a hold of Nicole? If you would like to talk to her. Nicole, what's your website?
So it is www.easterndoorcounselingllc.com. That's the name of my practice, Eastern Door Counseling LLC.
Okay, I just typed that in the chat room for those of you that are there in the chat. Can we talk for a moment about how therapy has changed over the years, and in many cases, not all, but allows for the conversations that we are having under the umbrella of all of this ancestral wisdom and healing? I see a shift in it. You, as a practitioner of it, what is your perception of the way now that people aren't being looked at as insane or mentally unwell when they begin to talk about their relationship to animals?
Yeah, and that can be, I guess it depends on the practitioner, because there are, I'm sure, still practitioners out there who, may be concerned about maybe, seeing like hallucinations, or, seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there, that other people can't. But I do think that there is more of a curiosity and kind of knowing, the animal totems, that's become more of a mainstream thing. I hear a lot of the kids that I work with talk about, like, what's your spirit or your animal totem? What's your spirit animal?
Yeah.
So that's very, mainstream, at least with the younger generation, and I'm so grateful for that, because there's so much wisdom and information that, if we're getting an animal consistently that's coming to us, or we feel a connection with an animal, knowing what the energy is of that particular animal, or the wisdom that they carry, it's so valuable in giving us insight and clarity in our lives.
Yeah, they're amazing. Tracy Civic is mentioning that her 3 cats have really helped her, since her awful automobile accident, that they've been there, to help bolster her. And for some people, that may seem nonsensical, but I do believe the world is finally opening their eyes, and the consciousness of so many around the world is now saying, and what about our animals? And a lot of it has come from generational changes. And Lindy, you've been teaching for 42 years. So number one, you're a living saint, because I don't know, you and David Fix, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah. But as a school teacher, have you noticed, because let's face it, if you've been teaching 42 years, you have got grown adults, and you and I've been in airports with Linda where grown adults have seen her, spotted her, and run across the airport in Chicago to hug her and thank her for being such an amazing teacher on more than one occasion. It's quite something. But Linda, in looking at the evolution of your students, have you seen a more open acceptance of spirit or animals as living, loving, kind beings just in your classroom?
Well, yes, because what opened up is learning about how everything is energy stage, and then how everything comes from one energy in that science. So you were able to combine ancient wisdom with modern science and teach. And I was always lunatic rooms section. And I'd always try to open their mind for 15 minutes with kind of some bizarre things, but always planting some good.
Yeah.
And it's just been just a privilege to be able to teach some of this stuff that now is, this is so important now. Well, I've been teaching it for 10 years or something, and it's just a show so that's,
It's amazing how we're watching our young people really kind of leading the way in even our understanding of what happens at a farm, right? That's a whole other show. And I don't have enough Kleenex in my office right now to start talking about what happens at dairy farms. Not all, of course, but some of them. That's a whole different show. But Cad, in your practice in shamanism, and you are also a pediatric nurse practitioner, so you're at the hospital. You are in the world of science. You are also a death midwife. And so you walk an amazing path between physicality and spirit. which I applaud you for, because you're a tremendous light in both worlds, When you have somebody there in the hospital, as a pediatric nurse practitioner, I'll tell you, Elise was so tickled when Easton was back in the NICU at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital. I got this text message saying, Uncle Cad came to visit me in Easton today. And she was so happy that you came to see them both in the hospital. But you, as a medical professional, when a young patient, maybe even an older patient, says to you that they believe that animals talk, or they believe when animals come to them in a dream that that's real, how do you as a medical professional approach that?
I'd say I believe it too.
I love that.
It's interesting. I've had the opportunity more recently. Some of the nursing schools are asking me to come and share what I do at the hospital as a nurse practitioner, but they also have one of the instructors found out that I also do energy and shamanic work, and so I've also had the opportunity to share that with new nursing students, and it's interesting because when you're new into the field, you're very steeped in the science, and one of the things that I try and help them understand is caring for someone is more than just caring about their physical body. So one of the things that we talk about, that I talk about with them, is this idea in shamanism that we all come into this world with a helper, oftentimes called our power animal, and that animal is often it comes with us because it has medicine that is going to be important to share with us for our journey. And one of the things that I do in my practice is that I sometimes help people discover what that animal is, and then after we have that encounter, then I talk to them about going and finding out what they can about that animal, because that animal has gifts, and it has gifts for you, gifts that are probably important to you as you're journeying in your everyday life. So the other thing I do kind of clarify is there's a little difference between your power animal and animal totems, because you may have animals that will just show up in your life, and it may show up in a particular time in your life because you're going through something, and they have the medicine that you'll need for that particular time, and then that animal may step back. But your totem animal is usually the animal that journeys with you through your entire life, and is there to help support you as you're going through things. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things that I oftentimes with kids will notice is oftentimes kids will collect a certain type of animal. So they tend to, like one little child I was taking care of the other day. He had this fox, and he takes this fox wherever he goes with him. So, not all kids are attracted to bears. So sometimes, and then what you sometimes will find is that person, finds that throughout their life they're collecting foxes, and so sometimes that's a clue to the animal that may be walking with them during this journey. Mm-hmm. I think it's absolutely true that people, as they get closer to crossing over the veil, that their animals are right there to meet them. Mm-hmm. They're as much as, and so I believe that they're watching over us as well. One thing I was going to ask you, because you probably can speak to this. What about the white animals? And specifically, I was thinking about the white buffalo calf woman.